So, what I did last time was I was considering a group G, and we were considering a subgroup H contained in G. Then we defined left and right cosets. These are of the form HG and these are of the form GH, okay, where this element H is in H. So, this is runs over all the elements of this group H, okay. And what we found was that this is partitioning the group into disjoint sets. That is important property of this object. Then we said, we gave the definition, H is an invariant or normal subgroup of G if, let us say, GH G inverse is H, all G in G, or GH is equal to HG, okay. So, left and right cosets same. So, this means and right cosets are the same. Okay. So, now I will give plenty of examples, okay, of this object, okay. But before I even go on, okay, a classic example for us is, okay, translations in Poincare groups form an invariant subgroup. Let us prove this. So, let me call these translations T4. So, T4 here is a group of translations of the form A1. Okay. So, A's are just elements of the 4-dimensional real vector space. And we want to show that this is an invariant subgroup. So, you remember the rule of multiplication, you remember it, A lambda, A prime lambda prime, yeah. Do you recall what it is? This had a particular formula. It is worth your while to go through the notes, otherwise very soon you will lose me completely. Okay. So, this is of the form A plus lambda A prime, lambda lambda prime. Okay. This is the rule of multiplication we got. We also found A lambda inverse was minus lambda inverse A lambda inverse. For you can easily see what it is, A lambda, this object, minus lambda inverse A lambda inverse is A plus lambda acting on this, which is 0, and then you get 1. Agreed? So, this is the inversion. Now, we want to check what happens if I take, well, B lambda, let us say I want to check that the translations form an invariant subgroup. So, let me write here lambda prime A lambda, the inverse of this B lambda prime inverse. This is, I want to look at this. I want to show that this is another translation. So, we just work it out. This is equal to B plus lambda prime A lambda prime from here, then the inverse of this, which is minus lambda prime inverse B lambda prime inverse. So, you see that this part goes to 1, which is what is interesting for us. As regards this part, what happens is B term cancels out. So, you simply get here lambda prime A. Okay. So, this is another translation. In fact, it is the Lorentz transformed translation, and there is no Lorentz transformation left here. So, we have proved that the translations, so we have proved that B lambda prime is any translation B lambda prime inverse is T4. Okay. This is going to play an important role in a minute. Okay. Okay. Now, the importance of an invariant subgroup, okay, is that the thing I proved, okay, so like theorem, okay, if H is invariant in G, invariant subgroup, okay, in G, then G over H, which by definition is space of cosets. So, it is GH. I do not have to tell you left or right cosets because they are the same. Okay. This is a group, under set multiplication. Okay. In this group, the inverse of GH, well, H is identity, and the inverse of GH is G inverse H. This is where I stopped last time. So, now, okay, I have to give you examples. This is what I will do now. Okay. But there is a problem which you should check out this problem, okay, which is one of the things there. Okay. The problem is quite nice. If, let me write, I will simply make a sequence of statements. If phi is a homomorphism okay, from G to G prime, so we consider a homomorphism from G to G prime which we have defined. Okay. Then we know that pi of identity is identity E prime. This we know. Okay. But consider all G in G, okay, such that pi of G is E prime. There is no reason why this map should be 1 to 1. So, you have this G here, your G and G prime. So, this is identity of G prime, this is G prime, and there will be many elements. Of course, identity will go there, but many other elements can go. Okay. Then it is a fact, this implies, okay. So, this is called, okay, the kernel okay, ker pi for the map pi. Okay. So, all the things which go to identity. Now, what I ask you to prove is, prove that it is an invariant subgroup of G. So, the kernel of this homomorphism, and we will check it out in specific cases, is an invariant subgroup of G. Okay. And secondly, okay, B, is an invariant subgroup. So, you can consider G modded by ker of pi. Okay. This group is isomorphic to G prime. Okay. So, the kernel, if you quotient G by the kernel of the map, you will get back the image that you are getting. Okay. Huh? Yeah, but yes, I am always assuming onto. Yeah.
More generally, just be the image of the map pi.
The image of the map pi of G will be G prime by assumption. I am assuming it is onto. Okay. Otherwise, you have to do some other things. So, very often in the literature, and it is a nice thing to know, this is given by a map, let us say a picture. Okay. So, let me show you what is called an exact sequence of maps. Let us say in this case it is homomorphisms. What does it mean? So, here I will show you. Okay. You have got, suppose you have groups and you put arrows. I will assume always. So, you have maps here, say pi 1, pi 2. Okay. Now, if you say it is an exact sequence, what it means is the kernel of pi 2, this means if it is an exact sequence, kernel of pi 2 is image of pi 1. This is the rule. What you get from here is picked up by this and mapped to the identity here. Okay. If you have a sequence like this and you say it is exact, okay, that means this equation here. Okay. Now, slight generalization of this, will lead you to what is called complex, and if you have done any time differential geometry, you will get it there. Okay? And it's quite general. So why am I bringing this up? Well, so we can tell this. So the problem is the statement so I start with some group with some identity. Okay? So let me call it some group consisting of simply one identity, one element E. Okay? They map it to G. So this in this mapping, the image is, this is only one element, so it's one element here. So in the next step, okay, no, this is not right. No, this is H. Okay. So the next step, I am mapping into G. Since this is going to the identity, this map only identity goes to here. So this is 1 to 1. So the image of H is H here. So in the next step, I go to G over H. Okay. So since the image of H here is H, because this is 1 to 1, the kernel of this map is all of H, so it goes here. Then to express the fact that it is onto, which was also mentioned, it goes to some other group, say some E prime. So all of this goes to 1. So this means that this must be onto, because this map is picking up all of, the kernel of this map is all of this. So the image of this must be onto. So this picture here, which is an example of what people call as an exact sequence, is the result that I was stating here. Okay. This kind of result, I did not do it just like that, okay. But if you some of you came to that other talk I gave yesterday, I don't know if you came, okay. At some point we will be discussing defects in solitons, okay. And there you get these homotopy groups, okay, which is some topological characterization of some configurations in quantum field theory. And there this kind of diagram happens to be very important. Okay. There are things called exact homotopy sequences and so on, where this graph, this kind of thing goes on and on and on. Okay. Yeah, it goes on and on and on and on for the homotopy groups. Okay. And it is very useful to computate. If you have that thing in mind, many times you can avoid computation and just read off the answer from looking at it. Okay. So this is a prelude to that kind of activity. Okay. So let me then go on to examples. One, the simplest example one of the simplest example is the following. I take G to be SO3, O3. So it has real orthogonal matrices with determinant +1 and -1. I take H to be SO3. So the determinant here is +1, and since let us say SR S inverse determinant is equal to determinant of R, you see that SO3 H is invariant. H is an invariant subgroup. It's okay. Now we want to find the cosets and their multiplication table. Okay. Well, if S is in O3 and determinant of S is equal to -1, we saw that I can write this as S as parity times R, where P is the element -1 and R is in SO3. Which implies S SO3 is P SO3. Because this R here can be absorbed back here. So, there are only two cosets. Namely SO3 and PSO3, and we can write down the multiplication table. So, we have SO3, PSO3, and likewise SO3, PSO3, right. Yeah. Here it is simply SO3 again. Here it is PSO3, this multiplying this is again PSO3 and this is SO3. So, what is this group? What is this group? O3 over SO3. Z2, right? Or S. So, this is simply the permutation on two objects, I called it S2 before. Isomorphic 2. When I write like this, up to isomorphism, that is it. Okay. Now, here is a more complicated example, namely I want to check Poincare modded by T4. Okay. What is this group? So, we want to know what this group is in some familiar language. We know that translations form an invariant subgroup. So, what is this? Well, anything like this is an element of the Poincare group, can be written as A1 times 0 lambda. You can check A plus, yeah, okay. A plus 1 0 which is A, 1 lambda which is lambda. So, if I look at translations times A lambda, I am taking the right coset, you can also take left coset. What is this? I insert this decomposition here, and what happens to this? This is a translation, so it is swallowed by this T4. Okay. So, this becomes equal to T4 times 0 lambda, right? Yes. So, you can see what is the group, the quotient group, what is it? Lorentz group, right? So, it implies T4 0 lambda. So, every coset is labeled like this. Then I can pass this through. So, this is T4 times 0 lambda lambda prime. So, this is isomorphic. So, we can say Poincare over translations is isomorphic to Lorentz group. Okay. There is another standard example which is simple but useful. So, let me also write this. Okay. Let us take the permutation group Sn. Now, I just state now any S, any T can be written as T is equal to T1 up to Tk, where Ti are transpositions. We will prove this later, not difficult. Transposition means it exchanges only two of the elements. Okay. The way you write this is not unique. Okay. There are many ways of writing this, but what is unique is while in one Ti are not unique, this one, okay, evenness or oddness of K is. So, an even permutation is even. Okay. You may write it in many different ways, but it will always stay even. Likewise, odd one. Okay. Now, this says therefore that consider all even permutations. They form a group because even times even is even. So, the set of, and what is that group called, do you know? It is called the alternating group, subgroup. Okay. The set of all even permutations form a subgroup of Sn is called An of Sn. It is called the alternating subgroup. Okay. Now, An is normal in Sn, okay, okay, because okay, since let us look at T inverse. I have given you T there. What is inverse? You read it backwards. Okay, is Tk up to T1, right? Because Tk squared is 1. Okay. The evenness T and T inverse are either both even or odd. Okay. T inverse are both even or odd. Right? Because I can just read it backwards. This implies T ak An T inverse is An, because maybe both are odd, but the product is even. Okay. So, An is an invariant subgroup of Sn. Okay. Or An is invariant in Sn. What is a quotient? Is there any guess? It is again S2, right? So, clearly, okay, since any odd T I pick any some particular transposition, call it T1, okay, times some T prime. Okay. T1 is any fixed transposition, any transposition pick any one, and T prime is even. It does not matter which you pick. Okay. it follows immediately, just like in the previous cases, that Sn over An is again isomorphic to S2. Now there are I have sort of looked at simple examples, but there is one point I want to make. Okay? Recall. See, you have got this G H G inverse is equal to H, okay? But G is an element of G. So this elements of G is creating automorphisms of H. Okay. So you remember at definition. So each G in G, okay, creates an automorphism what is it? Call it f of G0, f of G of H. What is this? F of G of H is G H G inverse, right? It is conjugating the elements, so it is clearly an automorphism, and you don't leave H. Okay? So it is creating an automorphism, but it is not inner, not necessarily inner, because this G here, do you know what is it? What is the inner automorphism? That is, but there may not be an H prime in H such that f of G is equal to f of H prime. G is any element of the group, and it may be that there is no H prime like this. So these automorphisms can be non-trivial. Okay. Now here is a now actually okay. In fact, in many cases it is not. In fact, it is not trivial. Okay. One point to notice is, so check. So this is a new. The set of FGs from a group okay. I need some notation. It may not be all the automorphisms of H, so I need some notation for this. Call it, let me call it automorphism prime of H. I am putting a prime there because I do not know that H, I am exhausting all automorphisms of H. In general, that is not true also. Okay. Show that the inner automorphisms is an invariant subgroup of this group. Okay. Show that the inner automorphisms, which you remember what is inner automorphisms? Okay. They are the ones which are created by the H's. This is a easy proof. Okay. Is an invariant subgroup. Of this set here, automorphism prime of H. Okay. And you can look at the quotient group. Okay. The just to complete. Okay. This is what we call the notation is the notation. Just for I will go on to something else. Okay. All automorphisms of H is usually called as OT H. Okay. The inner automorphisms of H, I think it is called in H, inner automorphisms of H. Okay. One can quite generally prove that this is a normal subgroup of OT H. Okay. It is not difficult. Okay. In H is normal in OT H and the quotient is called the outer automorphisms. It is called outer automorphism, out H. This structure happens, okay. For example, this structure arises when one is if you have done Born-Oppenheimer approximation. Do any of you know what it is? Okay. You in molecule when you are trying to do molecules, you have done it. You know what is Born-Oppenheimer rigid, where you treat molecules as rigid bodies. You have done it. You have some familiarity. Then the so-called symmetry groups of the molecule are discrete subgroups of rotations called H. Okay. And these, but they are sitting inside the rotation group. So you can ask, what are the automorphisms, what elements or what rotations will leave this H invariant? Okay. What are the out? Okay. And in general there are a lot. For example, if you take icosahedral group or something like that, there are a lot of these things, and they affect the physics of the problem. For example, the energy levels of the molecule, and you can detect them by transitions or lines in the molecule. Okay. So this is used in the analysis of, for example, molecular spectra. They also turn up in discussions of quantum gravity. Okay. So this is an aside. Here what is happening is that this automorphism of H, because I am dealing by putting H in G as an invariant subgroup, it may not be the full automorphism group, but at least it is a subgroup of the full automorphism group. Okay. Okay. Actually this thing, funnily enough, also turns up in things like proving the Poincare conjecture. You know what it is? Do you know what is a Poincare conjecture which was proved by Perelman? Okay. It is a claim that the only simply connected 3-dimensional compact manifold is S3, the 3-dimensional sphere. Okay. Every other compact manifold in 3 dimensions is multiply connected. Okay. You know what is connectivity? If you take a loop, you cannot shrink it to a point. Okay. You cannot, so Poincare conjecture is in 3 dimensions. The only simply connected 3 manifold which is closed, which is compact and boundaryless, is the 3-dimensional sphere. Okay. The proof of the theorem involves considerations of this kind. Okay. There is some Thurston, there are some Thurston classification and things of this kind. Okay. So where all the time you come across this kind of problem, because they are all dealing with the rotation group SO3 and its various subgroups. Okay. Okay. In some S3 actually, SO3 or S3, and then the way various groups, various subgroups of SO3 act on 3-dimensional spheres. Okay. That is where the whole thing comes. Okay. So this is quite useful, and those structures also turn up in considering quantum gravity. So it is good to know these things. Okay. Now I want to, sorry?
So what does compact mean?
Compact. Closed, and but he will ask what is closed. The technical meaning of boundaryless, you know, okay? That for example, if you take a disk, it has a boundary, you know. So, you have a set of points whose neighborhoods do not look like what is in the tangent space looks different. You know what is tangent, take tangents look different. Compact for us meaning is that if every infinite sequence has a limit point. That is, if you take line, you can take infinite sequences going to infinity, right. So, it is not compact, but on a circle you can never do this. If you take an infinite sequence, it will have a limit point, maybe more than one. Okay. So, if you do complex analysis, there is a standard result called the Bolzano-Weierstrass theorem. Have you come across? If you take a bounded infinite sequence in the complex plane, they will say there is a limit point. Okay. You are doing complex variables, you know? No. In complex analysis, one of the basic things you start from is to show that if you take a bounded infinite, bounded means you have an infinite sequence, all of which are bounded by some constant c, fixed constant c. So, it cannot be put in some square, okay, all the points. Then the Bolzano-Weierstrass theorem says that there is a limit point. Limit point means every neighborhood of it will intersect members of the sequence, okay, which is the same statement as saying a bounded a closed bounded set in a plane is compact, okay. It is the same statement, okay. So, compact means that every infinite sequence must have a limit point, okay. In some sense it is volume is finite and so on, okay. If you have a metric, if you have a volume, you know how to integrate it, you have a metric, then the volume of that space is finite. That is another way.
There is another way to think about it. Compactness is the property which ensures the following result. This is what you sort of want. Something is compact, if something is compact. And then if you take any, say, real value function, compact, and it always takes a minimal value.
And a maximum value. That is another way to say it. A continuous function, that is another way of carrying. Any continuous function on a compact set is bounded, okay, and it has a minimum and a maximum, okay. Any continuous, that is another way, is completely equivalent statement. Every continuous function, okay, on a compact set is bounded. Continuous function complex valued. If it is a real valued, it has a maximum and a minimum, as you are saying, okay. So, that is completely equivalent, these are completely equivalent statements, okay. Now, I want to tell you another concept, okay, namely conjugacy classes. It is another way of dividing a group up into disjoint sets, okay. And this one, we will see that one cosets, well, cosets is a device for dividing a group by another group if it is invariant. But later we will see, especially when if we consider representations of Poincare group, that cosets is a way of classifying group actions on manifolds, okay. Every time you have a group, say rotation group is acting on the two dimensional sphere, okay, right, you rotating the points, then we can, there is a immediate way of identifying the sphere with a coset space immediately, and one can prove that essentially all group actions on manifolds can be given by taking appropriate cosets, okay, or their unions. So, that is one very important property of cosets for physicists, okay. In many times we use this, okay. For example, when you consider solitons, it plays a very important role. Conjugacy classes, on the other hand, turns out to play a very important role in representation theory, okay. It enables you to count the distinct representations. We will see later that in some sense, when I finish, okay, we have not defined what is meant by a representation, but the number of these conjugacy classes will give you the number of these representations, and there is some algebraic structure underlying this it will tell you what will happen if you compose angular momenta, for example. Okay. So, what is this? Okay. The class, the conjugacy class containing G0 in G, okay, is a set, okay, G0 G inverse, all G in G. Use conjugate. This also partitions the group. Okay. So you can see immediately. Okay. Example. Okay. The conjugacy, the class containing E is simply the identity, as I said. But in general there will be many conjugates, the class containing in permutation. So, in Sn, okay, well I have to come back to it later. It is given by something called the cycle structure, but so I will come some, or it will immediately lead you to some partitions of integers. So, we will come to that later. Okay. So, this is a very simple. So, notice again that this is equivalence relation. Note that. Okay. What is the note? Being in a class defines an equivalence relation. What do I mean? Let me call it like so. Okay, what does it mean? That means that it is symmetric. That is, if G1 is equivalent to G2, okay. If G2 is the same class as G1, this implies G2 is equivalent to G1. Okay. 2, G is reflexive. That means G is equivalent to itself, kind of trivial. And thirdly, it is transitive. There is G1 equivalent to G2, G2 equivalent to G3, means G1 is equivalent to G3. Okay. So, this is what is meant by an equivalence relation. Okay. It is an equivalence class. Okay. They are all related by declaring that they are in the same conjugacy class. I define a relationship which has these three properties. Okay. I just mentioned it in passing. Okay. Yeah, I want to give one example of a conjugacy class. Okay. Consider example. Consider SO3. Okay. The conjugacy class containing I take a particular element, okay, rotation by angle theta around axis n, okay, call it r n theta. What is the conjugacy class? taking an axis and rotating, considering rotation by an angle theta. Now, I will now, the conjugacy class will take this and conjugate it by an arbitrary element of SO3. What will I get? What will it do? It will give the same angle but all axes. Okay, is okay. It will be this thing r m theta, okay, where m is any axis. The angle won't change. I will just rotate the sphere. So, rotation will just take one axis to another axis. So, I will get all rotations by the same angle. Okay. This, by the way, this equation will come back to us when we start looking at representations of the rotation group. Okay. Now, as a final two conceptual statements, generic statements, before I go into the what is the heart of physics, namely representations. Okay. Huh? It is a sphere. It is not a sphere. Rotation, it is a sphere. It is not sphere with antipodal points identified. It is just a sphere. The other one will be some RP2 or something. It will be non-orientable or whatever. It is not that. So, actual axis is the same angle. Okay. Now, I want to make two more definitions. Okay. Simple groups. A group is simple. Group G is simple if it has no invariant subgroup besides, of course, there is always two trivial things, okay, the identity and G. Okay. Simple groups have a particular simplicity. We will see that being simple means it tells something about when you try to represent these groups by linear operators, they have some specific property which is very easy to deal with. Okay. Now, what are examples? It is not easy to prove, okay, but it is a fact that SO3 and the connected Lorentz group, that is Lorentz group which preserves the sense of time and has determinant +1, are simple. I will omit the proof. It is not so it's not so obvious. Okay. I think so far as I know, in the second case certainly, in the first case it is Wigner. Actually showing by 3 by 3 matrices here and dealing with it. I think you will find a proof of it in this book on group theory and quantum mechanics, and the Lorentz group also is not so easy to prove, but there exist proofs. But SU2 is not simple, not simple. Let me give you a sequence of examples. A, SU2. So it has an invariant subgroup. What is it? I mean, it is. I am saying it is not simple. That means it has some invariant subgroup. What is it? We have seen this. Is center 1 and minus 1. No? Okay. It has invariant subgroup is H will be simply 1 and minus 1. It is obvious. Huh? SUN is not simple. For any n, I am looking at not simple. So, I have to give you for SUN what is the invariant subgroup, call it H. So, what is H here? There is some analog of this sitting here for any n. What will it be? Okay. It has to be a unitary matrix with determinant plus 1, right. So, it has to be of the form exponential I 2 pi over n k times unit matrix n cross n, okay, where k will run from 0 up to n minus 1. So, it is the center is the roots of unity, or yeah, Zn by Zn I mean roots of unity, nth roots of unity, yeah, nth roots of unity, nth 0 1 2 3, yeah, there are n elements. For SU2 you have 2 elements, SUN you have n elements. This thing is what distinguishes, if you know something about QCD, quarks from gluons. The way this the response of those quantum fields under H, this subgroup tells a quark apart from a gluon. Okay. Now, as a final example, let me look at C, Poincare group. It is not simple because we have seen that H is the translation subgroup. So, Poincare group is not simple. Simple groups have a certain simplicity because it tells you something about the representations or when you go into linear operators, but it turns out that the Poincare group, even though it is not simple, it has some other particular structure inside it which makes it very easy to deal with from the point of view of a field theorist. Whereas, if you look at the Lorentz group and look at its properties, they are very complicated. Okay. So, it is a very striking situation. There is, if you try to understand Lorentz group, there is a whole book, Naimark has a whole book on the Lorentz group. Okay. It is very complicated. Okay. Whereas, the Poincare group we shall see later, we can easily understand, okay. And it tells you something about it is because of this structure we are able to tell that, for example, if you have a particle of if you have an elementary particle, we can tell what are the possible spins of the elementary particle, okay. What will happen to the angular momentum if you go to a moving frame. All these things can be completely stated essentially after some preparatory material in one lecture. Okay. So, simple does not necessarily mean simple in all ways. In some particular ways there may be certain simplicities. Okay, I will stop here and we will continue with this tomorrow.